Okay, we're down to item number 8, notification of next of kin by a sheriff's office when inmate is admitted to the hospital. Commissioner Richardson.
Well, we've heard from the Anderson family about this. It's a heartbreaking story of what happened to this young man, and it does turn out that the sheriff has no policy because he's been asked repeatedly, what is your policy, and he's never answered the question. So I'm making a motion tonight that is as follows, that the sheriff is to notify, I would push for an ordinance on this, not just a resolution, because these guys have a tendency to ignore resolutions. So we'd start the ordinance process, that the sheriff is required to notify the next of kin, and he has that information, when someone is admitted to the hospital. I don't mean taken for a hospital visit or emergency room visit. I mean when they're admitted to the hospital, it's serious enough that the next of kin should be notified. That is my motion.
And I second that motion, and I'll tell you the reason why. It's the way I feel about that situation. It pertains to Beaufort County and the people that's in it. And when the sheriff takes custody of a prisoner, arrests someone, he's in the sheriff's jurisdiction whether he's in the jail or he's in the hospital. So I think it's really the sheriff's department's problem to notify the members of the person's family just as soon as he possibly can. So that's the reason I'm seconding Commissioner Richardson's motion.
Any other comments?
Can I ask a clarification? Is this to start the ordinance process?
Yeah, I think we should do this as an ordinance.
So do an ordinance for this or start the ordinance process?
Well,
I know there's
yeah, well, start the ordinance process. We can have an ordinance that says that requires the sheriff to do that.
How does the sheriff have the next of kin, and who is the next?
When they come into the jail, they fill out papers of who their next of kin is. And if he doesn't know, he can find out.
And
This
they
is a
should
serious
get
event.
They should get an emergency phone number.
Yeah.
I just don't think next of kin is a legal term. Why not a family member? That would be.
I don't have a problem with that.
I mean, next of kin can be children.
I know, yeah,
A wife is really not a kin, but she's married to him.
yeah.
Potentially, there's all kinds of problems with terminology.
That he notify the family. And since we're starting the ordinance process, if this passes, we have some room to do some word mechanics on the wording of the ordinance.
Well, if I was in the custody of the sheriff and you didn't notify my wife and notified my son, I'd be very upset.
Yeah.
I would be very upset.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman? If it's a, I'll wait till this. If it's a medical issue, it falls under HIPAA. HIPAA is very clear on who you can notify and not notify. So if we're talking about a hospital situation, the hospital has, as you go into the hospital, you give them a name. That's the only person that they can notify. And if there happens to be some circumstances where they notify, let's say, the wife or the mother, that's the only person that can be notified. If an uncle comes in and wants to be told, or the kids want to come in to, they can't. I don't believe we have enough information here to make a decision. Number one, did the hospital notify someone? Did the sheriff follow everything? Are these people trying to sue us or sue the county? And they're trying to generate a lawsuit, and we're going to get involved in it? We have no information here. And if it's a HIPAA thing, I don't care what ordinance you have, you could write to you blue in the face, nothing's going to ever happen. You'll get sued. And the person who gives you the information will get sued, if you understand anything about HIPAA.
Look, the way HIPAA works is when they go into jail, they're going to fill out a paper that says who is to be notified.
And how do you know who they
you're trying to
notify?
make this into another unsolvable problem, Commissioner. This is not an unsolvable problem.
No,
I said start the process. That means all of these things that people are bringing up will be addressed before the process is over in order to have the ordinance.
You're pontificating again.
That's
You're
your
making
opinion,
things up.
which isn't
No, it's
worth
not.
very much.
And how do you know the person that didn't give a name, and how do you know the right person wasn't notified? You know that for a fact?
he fills it out and he signs it, or he fills it out, or he gives us the information. You can only use best effort.
And how do you know the hospital didn't notify the right person?
You're trying to undermine something. Let's get off of it and get into the human race where we notify
trying to
loved
be
ones
correct.
about bad situations. Try to make it work.
You guys let somebody else have the floor. Okay, Commissioner Langley.
All right, and I understand exactly what Commissioner Richardson is saying, and I agree with him. I mean, there are next of kin, relatives that are signed in when they go into the jail, and I don't see a problem with simply notifying family that somebody's gone to the hospital. And you talk about HIPAA. HIPAA's not going to come into play. The only thing you're saying is Jerry's in the hospital. That's not HIPAA. So I don't really see a problem with that. Anything above and beyond that, yeah, you may get into trouble, but simply letting family members know your son was was here in the jail. He's had a heart attack. He's in the hospital. There's nothing wrong with doing that. And that's just the way I feel about that.
Mr. Chairman,
All right.
just to further what I said earlier, and the reason I mentioned that the sheriff's department needs to be the one that does the contact, because it would be easy for something like that to fall through the cracks if you're waiting for somebody else to do it. So I think the person that's in charge of the person that is in jail needs to make that contact. So,
Okay, you've heard the discussion. I'm going to oppose it from the standpoint that this is within the elected position and the decision of the sheriff. And nobody has told me that we do not have a policy and that the policy was not followed. So I will not support that because this is under the guidance of the sheriff and the sheriff's department, and I have a lot of confidence in Chief Rose and what goes on over in the sheriff's department. So I will oppose.
Mr. Chairman, I want to remind you, the lawsuit's going to come to you. It's not going to come to the sheriff.
You seem to go ahead, Mister.
My mother's 88 now, and we're kind of going through the same thing. We went to see an attorney. How do we handle this process? 2 years ago, you said you better have power of attorney. You better have a HIPAA, because that's the way the hospital is going to take care of it. Now it's 2 years later, and we're going to another attorney. It's the same thing. It's a difficult situation, but the way the hospitals work, it's going to be whose name is on there. They're going to start there, and if your name's not on that list, it makes it impossible for the hospital, I think, to do the things we'd like them to do it the way they did it years and years ago. But
If I go and put my wife down there, you ain't got the business calling my daughter.
Well, it does not have to be a family member. It could be anybody,
I think
person of
it's
their
it
own
could be
choice.
anybody,
Yeah.
but they're the only ones that can talk to the
Okay.
hospital.
We're ready to vote. So all those in favor of the motion, raise your right hand. Okay, all those opposed? Vote was 4-3, and it passes. Okay, item number 9.